No, we've got platitudes.
Your points are being made. If you've got information, bring it at the end of the meeting. I can't handle a specific in the meeting.
And I was lied to.
Okay, bring those forward at the end of the meeting. You also want to make a comment, and then I'm going to move on to the next question.
Yes, please, as Chair, I don't mind saying who I am. I'm Diane Kelly and I'm Assistant Branch Secretary for Unison. And I would clearly want to say here that I wouldn't wish anybody to personalise any members of our workforce who work tirelessly to deliver public services on Wirral.
Yeah. I think that's a really helpful statement.
And I don't know who I'm sitting by here, but clearly there seems to be quite a bit of anger. I don't know who you are.
Okay, can I ask you not to have a sub-meeting? Could I ask you not to have a sub-meeting?
I'm getting accused of something. All I want to say is that would you as Chair keep any personal remarks? Would you rule them out?
I'm trying to rule them out as they arise, but it's not proving to be very easy. From here on, I need your cooperation. Please do not make personal comments. We are talking about Wirral Council's improvement journey, and we must keep the comments at that level. You have an assurance from the Chief Executive that if you have other material that you think is of significance and that you would wish to see investigated, you can raise those issues with him in the appropriate way at the end of the meeting, and he will be available to do it. But people have rights, and we can't take away those rights by talking about them when they're not here. Sorry, could you address the Chair, please, rather than actually having a sub-conversation?
I'm not having a conversation.
No, I'm just asking that you address the Chair.
Freedom of speech.
I think that if you're in a meeting and we have other people who have already signalled that they have questions.
Next time.
Yeah. So, okay, we will move on. John King, you have 2 questions.
That would be me.
That would be you. Thank you, John.
I don't think I've got the energy for it.
Okay. Do you want us to give a reply to them?
I'm sure everybody's read this, so yeah, the reply is.
Thank you very much, John.
Thank you, John. First of all, I think you made a point about the known principles, which you set out in your question. I think the improved board, I'm sure, recognises the importance of the known principles, as does the council. And in fact, if I refer you to the members' code of conduct, which is included in the council constitution, the known principles are included in the members' code of conduct, and all members and officers would abide by them in their work. What I would say is that the improved board has said, subject to this discussion today, they recognise changes in fiscal and management leadership, they recognise there's change in culture but more work to do, and they have made a number of other comments. I think we can say progress has been made. It's a judgment of the board whether sufficient progress, but progress has been made. And in terms of the point about how can we reassure you that we've dealt with all the issues, as I said to you earlier, within this report, there's a critical instance report, which is a further 30 odd pages to the 63 pages we produced. So what we're trying to say to you is we've been serious in trying to do it. I'm not pretending it's 109%. We may have missed something out. There's 1 or 2 points we picked up in the meeting today, which we will pick up, and Nick here is doing a lot of work on this. We'll be recording them and we'll be following them up. So all I can say is, you may not accept we've done everything. I think we've done an awful lot. But what we're trying to show is that we are committed to doing all that's necessary to correct any mistakes that were made in the past. And I think the council has laid itself pretty wide open by this process, by the report process, the incident process, and the majority of the audit committee to actually, and also by the fact that we actually want the improvement board to come back in March and see how we're getting on. That's the openness, I think, at least to accept we are trying to move on.
Thank you. Do you want to come back, or?
Was that the first or second question which you were answering, or a combined?
A combined, I think it was.
Combined,
so time efficient, is it?
Yeah.
If anything, I think is that I agree with you. Is the council certainly is moving on, and certainly has changed. There are still some matters which you've given an avenue to come to you at the very end regarding some aspects of which the council has been unable to received it. And I'll bring that to you again.
Thank you very much, John. Really appreciate that. Thank you very much. The final question in terms of your papers is from someone who wants to remain anonymous. So obviously we will now move straight into giving the reply to that question. I think, Jill, you wanted to make a comment on it and then I'll hand over to Graham in terms of that.
It was the one about council members improvement training, and I've been now working with this council for 2 years and 2 months, and I remember well when I first came along here, one of the things that really struck me was how little culture there was of member training and development, and actually how little budget. And I think it was one of the areas that colleagues were trying to get more of a hold of, and certainly we have a colleague here who was former member on improvement. And I think there was a big push to try and get that to happen. And all I would say from an external perspective, we've been really pleased with the way that the authority has really sort of grabbed this agenda and moved forward, and not just on training internally, but taking people out on trips to see other authorities and best practice. So inevitably, not everybody joins in with that to the same speed as others, but I do think it's one of the really positive things that we've seen over that period. A lot of hard work has gone in from members of the member training working party and officers as well to support that.
Thank you. Graham, do you
The only one thing I'd like to add on that point, Chair, is that I would generally say the vast majority of members are engaged very actively. I'd also like to say that whilst there's not agreement on everything from all parties, as you might expect, there's been agreement from all parties on the really big things. And I was delighted when I saw the voting on the scrutiny committee and the audit committee last night, before last, when people did not vote along party lines, they voted independently to support these two reports. I'm also delighted with the fact that these reports were supported by all 3 external peer members, irrespective of their political parties, and I welcome that all parties' support for this report. That's not to say it can't be improved. I'm sure it will be based on this discussion, but certainly members have been very positive. The second question from the anonymous person about what really matters question here. First of all, I would say that it is the most intensive questionnaire of any council in the country, with the highest level of return, 6,000 plus last year. We do design it in-house. The question says, how do we design it? We go out to an independent market research organisation to verify it is scientifically and produced and is balanced, and that is checked. And also we do work with focus groups, and particularly people with disabilities, young people and older people, and across all the constituencies, and go back to Greg's point, where there's any lack of return from any one constituency, for example, it could be, we go into that constituency and hold more groups and more workshops to get that sort of feedback. We also produce easy to read versions and video versions for younger people, older people, and people with various disabilities. So it is an attempt to engage people. It's not perfect. It's an attempt. It's better than every council in the country. I would say members do vary their decisions based upon that feedback. Not every decision they'll agree with, but I can point out every budget the decisions have been changed in part or in whole based on the feedback from the questionnaires.
Thank you very much. And let me just also say, sorry, I will bring you in a second. I've received just before the meeting a further public comment. I'll reply to the individual personally because he clearly doesn't want it to be in the general domain, but he would support the view that people have made that he does not yet feel that Wirral Council is in a position to go without an improvement board and gives him the evidence to the contrary. So I just want to put that onto the record because it does tally with some of the comments that we've had from people in the board. You wanted to come in?
Yes, thank you, Chair. I would just like to make one comment. My name is Tom Harney, by the way, and I am a member of the Council. I'll declare my interest. I've also been associated with members training for a long time. I've been a member of the Council for 20 years now. And I do think, to justify myself and my colleagues, that in fact there has been a high, over the years, there's been a high level of interest in fact in training. And the truth is, although it hasn't always been quite put this way, that in sort of working parties and so on, all three parties have always worked constructively together, and I certainly haven't been aware of some of the comments that have been made about this sort of conflict. There have been conflicts, and they've been focused on a few individuals, but as far as the council is concerned, there has been a lot of engagement from members. Obviously, it depends what exactly is put before them, whether they're going to turn up, because we have, especially in the last year, a huge number of training events, and people have a lot of work to do, and they have to make priorities. But I don't think there has been this change, because in the past we had actually a larger budget. It wasn't all spent, but we've had a large budget over the years for member training.
Thank you very much. In terms of all the questions, the supplementary questions and the comments, as the Chief Executive said, we will actually reply online in detail to those questions. Just a minute, please. And we will actually pick up the supplementary issues that were raised within the meeting. Those will also go to the Improvement Board, which is the Council and the external partners, on the 27th of November as part of the consultation response, so that we're aware of the strength of feeling that has been expressed within the room and the desire to see, some changes or a rebalancing and reconsideration of some of the recommendations. And we will take those comments into account when we come to that point. I am very mindful that I've promised, and it feels like an important promise, Martin Morgan, some time, to actually make a personal reflection and statement. And given that this did begin from his whistleblowing, I want to make sure that we have got time and that people are not disappearing before. We were scheduled to finish at 3 o'clock. You can make a very quick
Yes,
comment.
it is very quick. You see, my supplementary question wasn't answered in the furore in this corner. And that question to Graham was, I was saying, how can you know that your officers are guiltless when...
Okay, I'm not
the Chief Executive is committed to answering. I wanted to know how much did he pay Grant Thornton for each of the reports, and if Grant Thornton charged in excess of £200 an hour, that would mean that their attention would only buy 100 hours possibly on each case.
Okay, I think you've made a comment rather than
I know that I asked him as a question. I asked the Chief Executive to answer that question. How much did he pay for each report?
I feel that there's a sort of principle here that we're saying that this relates to further evidence that you
No, it
will
doesn't.
give
I
to
asked
the Chief
a question.
Executive, and we will
I
pick
asked
up,
a question.
We will pick up the question and answer it on the website, because I am most concerned to make sure that we do not take away time from someone who has specifically requested it as part of the closure. And although Graham wants to come back, I think that out of courtesy to each other, and having had this specific request, we really do need to allow time now, and we will run over clearly in order to allow that person to make the statement he wants to make. Must be about the council, must not be personalised, but we're very happy to hear, and I think the phrase was, could it bring closure in some way to the individual? So I hope it will do so. So Martin.
Thank you for giving me this opportunity today. It's strange circularity, because it was in this room in November 2008, so it's 5 years ago, that I was allowed to speak to the Audit and Risk Management Committee, and that basically set in motion subsequent reports. So this room is very relevant for that reason. The reason I've asked to speak today, and I'm cognizant that you were due to finish at 3 o'clock, so I'll try and make it as brief as possible, is that I promise that this will be my last ever performance at the council in terms of trying to convey some of my experience and what has happened subsequently. And I'll try and be as positive as I can. And just picking up on the comments made recently by the Chief Executive about we've won the war, now we must win the peace. And I've tried to avoid extended military references, but they do seem to be so very apposite in this case, because I feel as though I've been at war with Wirral Council since I whistle-blew in 2006. And I don't know about Wirral Council, but I'm suffering from battle fatigue. I mean, that's 7 years of my life. And considering some of the names I've been called, my wife said to me, you should be known as the 7-year snitch. But the issues I wanted to really, that made me want to come here today was actually related to the report specifically. And I was actually gratified to see in your introduction you actually mentioned the word denial, because that is something I've constantly fought against for all this period, those 7 years. To the extent that I had a very senior politician say to me, and only in February of this year, see Mr. Morton, this is what everyone says about you, you distort everything. Now, everything I've had to do, I've had to evidence time and time again. Now, what I wanted to suggest, the first stage of moving forward for the council from this episode is to fully acknowledge exactly what the issues were and what went wrong. I get no sense of that from Wirral Council. No one wants to move forward or look to the future more than me. But I cannot do so whilst my experience continues to be minimised or misrepresented. It was Michael Fraser, I think, who, when he was doing some work with the council on a consultancy basis prior to Mr. Birch's appointment, he felt the independent review was understated, and that's because it was. Now, I'm not asking for further investigations, especially as one of the outstanding issues from that report is being taken up by Mr. King. So that's gratifying. However, the main reason I asked to speak was to make a brief statement today, was to definitively state what I whistle-blew about, rather than what other people establish what I whistle-blow about. Yeah, this is one occasion where I could have actually come to the table. So,
sorry, we tried to make it informal.
Yeah, don't worry. It states on page 6 of your report, in January 2012, Wirral Council's Cabinet met to consider the findings of a recent report commissioned from Anna Klonowski Associates to undertake an independent review of the whistleblowing complaints raised by Martin Morton relating to claims of overcharging of vulnerable adults in council care homes between 1997 and 2011. Now, I'm not going to take issue with the fact that it didn't relate to care homes, and in terms of I get infuriated by the term overcharging. I mean, there are issues of unlawful charging, disability discrimination and financial abuse, and they're not my words, they're words that are used by others. And I've been down this road before. When the independent review was raised at Prime Minister's questions, the investigation was given to Paul Burstow, who gave it's probably the most inappropriate organisation to have investigated, which was the Association of Directors of Adult Social Services, who came back and said the issue was about a flawed charging policy from 2003 to 4. There's also an example, and this isn't a criticism of Dr. Jill Taylor, but it's the kind of issues that I've had to contend with, is that you're going on information that is given to you by officers, and one of those issues was a letter that was issued from Dr. Taylor saying that I'd actually been dismissed by the council.
Try not to personalise if you can.
No, I'm not personalising. This is a factual.
Yeah.
What I'm saying is that there was information given to, I'm not naming who gave that information to Dr. Taylor, saying that I'd been dismissed, because that suggested some culpability on my part. What I'm suggesting here is about the misrepresentation and not laying accusations.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay. So I wanted to definitively state what my whistleblowing was about, and this was in a letter written to the then Chief Executive, again I won't name him, you can work out who that was, on the 2nd of March 2007. And it states in that letter, this is after a prolonged struggle to get the issues addressed within my own department, and those were unethical illegal practice, including widespread and prolonged collusion with abuse, gross maladministration, financial mismanagement and bullying. They were my whistleblowing allegations. It wasn't just about a flawed charging policy or overcharging. And I state that because I know there's a lot of the concentration and a lot of the press coverage has been around the overcharging, but in the scheme of things, I understand that now the council is in the process of paying back £736,000 of unlawful charges. There was other issues in terms of that are included in the independent review, which indicate that because of not taking on board some of my concerns, £3.3 million of money was not claimed or was not charged, which could have been legitimately claimed. And I actually think the figure was higher based on Eugene Sullivan's subsequent investigation around toxic debts. That was the issue. That's why I was saying about financial maladministration. It was to do not only with the charging policy. I mean, in terms of the issues of the dealing with some of the organisations that I had grave concerns about. And we were talking with an organisation that was linked to organised crime. We were talking about severe allegations of abuse. They were my main allegations, including the death of a vulnerable person, which was subsequently investigated following the independent review, and it was decided there should have been a serious case review at the time, and there wasn't. So all kinds of allegations. So to actually narrow it down to the issue of charging, unlawful charging, is misrepresentative of what I whistleblow about. So I just wanted to make that main point. In terms of where we go from here, I mean, I did raise the question at the last improvement board, and I don't know what God you were praying to at the time. I know it snowed off, so I didn't appear at that one.
Yes, we did post the responses, yeah.
And the issue for me was around the culture and the mindset of the council, which to me is the main issue. Now, there's a comment on a quote from the report from page 62, I think it is. Let me just check. When you actually talk about the
Culture, yeah, it's in the last section, isn't it?
On page 62, changing culture. Now, the comment that I was making in the question I raised last time was the old one about culture eats process for breakfast. And again, I still feel as though the issues that are raised around culture in this particular section are largely process driven. They're around policies, they're around strategic direction, they're about engagement with key partners. They're all very important, but they're still very much process driven. In terms of the culture that I think needs to be addressed is basically, I'd like to echo the table, the words really of Sir Robert Francis from the Mid-Staffs Hospital Inquiry, and he identified the culture as a kiss-up, kick-down culture, and that's what I experienced when I worked for Wirral Council. And I'm not saying it's specifically confined to Wirral Council. I think it's endemic in a large number of British institutions, the BBC, the NHS, etc. And I think that is your main challenge. Now, I know the workplace isn't a democracy, but it does need to work towards being a meritocracy. And I think one of the culture changes that is essential is how the organisation responds to those who speak truth to power, and particularly whistleblowers. There is a mention in your report about revising whistleblowing grievance policies. But in terms of my advice to whistleblowers, and I think I'll echo what Professor David Lewis actually said to Liam Murphy from the Post and Echo, and when Liam asked him what would his advice be to whistleblowers, and he said in one word, don't. And I would echo that. Until you change the culture, you cannot feel safe in terms of speaking out. I mean, who in the right mind would whistleblow now? I mean, if I'm the exemplar, you're just not going to whistleblow. And I think that's a missed opportunity. I mean, there was a particularly curious mindset when I worked for the council that equated whistleblowing with disciplinary and capability issues. And there was a recent comment, an incredulous comment from a council that, whistleblowers are courted, even fated. Like, why would you want to engage with whistleblowers? I mean, I think an organisation that has learned that you do need to listen to whistleblowers is the Care Quality Commission. They're an organisation that had their own issues with whistleblowers, and in terms of the consequences of not listening to whistleblowers are profound. Not only in terms of reputation damage and financial damage, but also in health and social care that leads to abuse and ultimately could lead to death. Now, I was actually due to meet with David Bean, the Chief Executive of CQC, on Monday. That's been postponed until the end of the month. But that is about an organisation that wants to actually engage with whistleblowers and learn about how we can engage and properly support whistleblowers in terms of safeguarding not only the public purse, but more importantly, vulnerable people. And I think that's a positive move. And I know it's a huge mindset change, but I mean, whistleblowers are your friends. I don't know whether they should issue some T-shirts with Hug a Whistleblower Today on or something. I don't know, but the attitude needs to change. I mean, ultimately, if managers and regulators are doing their jobs properly, we wouldn't need whistleblowers. That's all I would say. Just finally, just some observations about the peer review and the improvement board. Now, my issue around peer reviews, and this is a personal prejudice, I'll hold my hand up to this, I think, and I'm not saying this was the case here, that there is a huge potential for compromise and conflict of interest. I feel as though, in terms of external scrutiny, there needs to be a broader representation on any kind of scrutiny. Now, I'm only speaking for myself. I only attended one, I think when it was the Corporate Governance Committee last September, and there was a session. I mean, I have to commend you on today's, in terms of the openness and engagement. But how it was presented there is that members of the public were allowed to ask questions, and then I didn't ask questions, but other members of the public asked questions, and then we were asked to leave. And I just felt as though, especially because of my contributions to the improvement board actually being formulated, I felt as though it was a question of,